I moved on, I healed, I grew, I did the next right thing for Hunter. That's the version that people want to hear. The version we're leaving is the end of the story, where you tell him to go, the door closes, and you get to live in peace. You start to rebuild and everything gets better and you finally get to live. That is not what happened. What happened was I entered a different kind of war, not the kind where you're fighting to leave, the one where you're fighting to stay free, where every decision you make is a move on a board you did not choose to play on, where you're 3 steps ahead because you have to be and you know that he's coming for you. You just don't know when or how. Chess. That's what your life becomes when you leave someone who cannot tolerate you being free. It's strategy. It's a long game. It's making moves in the dark, not knowing if they'll work, but knowing you can't afford to stop playing. And the thing about chess is you do not win by reacting. You win by anticipating, by thinking 5 moves ahead, by protecting your pieces while positioning yourself, by staying calm while he's trying to make you panic, by being patient while he's trying to force your hand. I did not want to play chess. I wanted to be done. I wanted to move on. I wanted to heal. I wanted peace. But peace was not an option when the other player refused to leave the board. So I learned the game because my son was watching and everything I had built was at stake and my freedom depended on it. I moved on, I healed, I grew, I did the next right thing for Hunter, and I also lived inside a reality where I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, where I knew my ex would come for me, where I knew this wasn't over just because he left the house. It was the beginning of a different fight. The one where you're free, but you're not. You're rebuilding, but you're also have to become someone who can hold both at the same time. The part where you learn to build your life while protecting everything you've created. I'm Megan Webster, an abuse recovery coach, a trauma-informed strategist, and the woman a narcissist hopes to never meet twice. This is the Narcissist Worst Nightmare podcast, and this episode is not about being paranoid. It's not about living in fear either. It's about understanding that when you leave an abusive relationship, especially when there's a child involved, the relationship does not end, it transforms. It becomes strategic. In the last episode, I told you how money changed my nervous system, how $3,400 gave me options, how financial autonomy was the thing that made leaving possible. This is the next chapter of my truth of how I solo parented a devastated toddler whose dad disappeared, how I ran a multi-6-figure business while undoing years of damage, how I started dating again and felt free for the first time in years, and then how my life flipped upside down the second I let my guard down. This is about rebuilding yourself while protecting everything you are building, breaking the patterns you inherited, deciding you're in power even when the board keeps shifting under your feet. If you are out and waiting for the next hit, or you're thinking about leaving and you're scared for what's to come next, this episode is for you. Right after he left, the rage text started immediately. Not apologetic or reflective. Rage, blame, and accusations. The kind of texts that are designed to destabilize you, make you doubt yourself, and make you feel like you've made a mistake. I did not respond to them. I let them sit. I screenshot and I saved them because I already knew this wasn't just emotional fallout. This was evidence. This was him building a case in his own mind where I was the villain and he was the victim, and I knew eventually the story would become his weapon. Hunter was devastated. He didn't know why his dad wasn't there anymore. He would ask for him. He would cry. And my heart broke because I couldn't fix it. I couldn't make his dad show up. I couldn't make him care. I wanted to be very careful about how I presented his dad not being there to Hunter. What I said was, you know how we go to the doctor when we get sick? And he would say yes. I said, so dad is away getting some help, and when he's ready, he will come and visit. The explanation felt true enough without being too much. It gave Hunter a bit of framework that made sense for his age. I gave him a little bit of hope without making promises that I could not keep. And it did protect him from the truth of his dad not having interest in seeing him. For over a year, his dad was gone. No calls, no visits, no texts asking how he was. I tried to encourage the relationship. I reached out. I offered opportunities. I sent photos. I kept the door open for Hunter, even though every part of me wanted to slam it shut and never look back. This was not about me. This was about Hunter and his dad, and I was never going to be the reason he did not have a relationship with him. His dad did not want it, and that was a hard thing to manage. I wasn't scared to be a solo parent. I was already doing that. Not much in my life really changed after he left. I was still the one getting up in the night, doing bedtime, managing meals, routines, appointments, milestones. But what I did feel was loneliness. When you're solo parenting inside of a marriage, you at least have the illusion of partnership. You at least have another adult in the house, even if they're not helping. When I asked him to leave, the illusion disappeared. It was just me and Hunter, me running a business, me managing a household, me holding it together while my son cried for someone who I didn't know if they'd ever come back. The loneliness was not about help with logistics. I'd already figured that out. It was carrying emotional weight alone. It was bedtime when Hunter would ask about his dad, and I had to come up with an answer that wouldn't destroy him. He was sitting on the couch after he went to sleep, trying to feel the quiet press into me like a physical thing. I didn't share this with anyone. I decided to carry this alone, and I had no backup. There was only one person in my life at the time that knew the absolute truth, my best friend. I called her more times than I could probably count. She didn't want me to feel like I was carrying all this alone with no backup. Yes, she was in another province, but she was a lifeline for me. It often felt like I was holding up this structure that if I let go, everything would fall. I never broke down. I just kept moving, because that's what you do when you're the only one holding things up. You move, you adapt, you figure it out. I didn't have the luxury of falling apart, because there's no one to catch you if you do. I have never shared publicly before. In 2024, something happened that I need to tell you, because it shows you who I was dealing with and why the chessboard metaphor is accurate. Hunter had just gone to bed. I was cleaning up in the kitchen and sat down at the table, and I heard the sound of glass breaking. He came right through the front door, drunk after 15 years of sobriety. And as someone that has had a lot of relapses trying to stay sober, I know the amount of pain you have to be in to drink again. He fell into the wall the second he was inside. I could barely understand him. He was angry, loud, trying to yell, but it wasn't coherent other than "you will pay." Pure panic hit my body, not fear, panic, like alarm bells. The kind that makes your vision narrow and your heart race and your brain go into survival mode instantly. The size difference between him and I is astounding. He could hurt me without even trying. He could hurt me by accident. He could hurt me on purpose. And in that moment, drunk and raging, breaking into the house, I knew he was capable of both. I didn't freeze. I moved. Hunter woke up. I could hear him crying. I grabbed him. I went out the back door and we drove up the street. Hunter never saw his dad. I made sure of that. And I stepped out of the car to call the RCMP. We sat in the car up the street in the dark and waited for the police to arrive. My whole body was shaking, but I kept my voice calm for Hunter. The RCMP came, removed him, documented it. They told me to file for a protection order that would take 6 months to be in effect, and I thought, what a joke. That was the night that changed a lot for me, not emotionally, strategically. Because now I knew he was incredibly unstable and unpredictable. He was willing to break into my home while drunk. I knew I couldn't trust anything he said or did because he wasn't operating from a place of understanding anymore, and I felt like this was just going to be the beginning. I said this before on social media, but my parents' divorce looked exactly like this. My dad got drunk, disappeared, not physically at first, but emotionally, and then eventually physically too. He stopped showing up, he stopped calling. He stopped being present in a way that mattered when your parents are going through a divorce and there's a big family change. I watched my mom try to hold the family together and pretended like everything was fine. I remember what that felt like as a 14-year-old. The abandonment, wondering if I could have done something differently, hoping he would come back, realizing he wasn't. The way my mom would make excuses for him and ask my sister and I to come to the phone to talk to him. The way she would protect him from our anger. The way she would tell us he loved us even when his actions said otherwise. When I became a mom and the same thing happened in my life, I felt the loop close around me like a fist. Trauma inheritance. The thing you swore you'd never repeat. The thing you promised yourself you'd break. And here it was, playing out in my own life with my son. But I made a decision. I wasn't going to do what my mom did. I was not going to pretend like everything was fine. I was not going to cover for his dad or make excuses, but I was absolutely going to protect Hunter in a way that I wasn't. I told him age-appropriate truth, and I made sure he knew it wasn't his fault. I told Hunter his dad was getting help, that his dad loved him even if he couldn't show up right now. I told him it was okay to miss him and we could talk about it any time. He's allowed to be sad or angry, and I held space for all of that without making Hunter carry the weight of it. I've never once said anything bad about his dad. I did not villainize him. I did not make Hunter choose sides, but I also did not lie. I didn't pretend his dad was doing something noble when he was just abandoning his son. That was my job, to break the cycle, to give Hunter something different than what I got, to make sure that he was loved and valued and important even if only one of his parents was present. I was breaking the pattern of covering absent parents. The pattern of kids being responsible for adult failures, the pattern of shame around abandonment, and the pattern of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. My own relationship with my dad changed during this time. We actually got closer. He became more present. He showed up for me and Hunter in ways that I've never had before. It was healing, but also confusing because it almost made me want to ask him why now and not then. But he was a great grandpa and he was being a great dad, so I didn't ask. We could be imperfect, complicated, better than it used to be, and still have some wounds the weight of the years that it wasn't. I kept reminding myself that this was never about me. I let him show up for Hunter. This was about giving Hunter what he needed. And if my dad could do that, even imperfectly, I was never going to be the one to stand in the way. A very common question that I get in my DMs is, what did I actually do to heal? I think they expect me to say something like therapy twice a week or morning meditation and all those cute little things on fucking Instagram. My actual work was me living and doing the things that I'd hidden for a long time and ran from. I grew my business. I showed up for my son. I rebuilt my identity piece by piece, not in a notebook, in real time, in actual life. I broke patterns I didn't know I was running until I had space and time to see them clearly. Self-abandonment. I had spent years making myself smaller to make other people comfortable. I stopped doing that. I started listening to my body, honoring my needs, saying no without apologizing for it, and drawing severe boundaries around myself and Hunter. I had this idea that love equals pain, or it needs to be earned. I grew up that love was conditional, and I had to perform to deserve it, that if I wasn't good enough, it would be taken away. I started teaching my nervous system that love could be steady, that I didn't have to earn my place, and that I could just exist and be valued. There was a moment I want to share with you that my dad and I had dinner when we were together in Mexico. He went on a tangent about how I deserve to be loved and respected and not have someone just leave me. In that moment, sitting across from him, I had this realization that that level of care and presence was what I had been hoping to have from him for a long time. My dad and I were separated for about 16 years, both of us on our own sobriety journeys and mental health healing. But I had chosen unavailable, narcissistic men my entire adult life because of my relationship with my dad. I was trying to earn from them what I never got from him. I was trying to make them stay, prove that I was worth loving, bending over backwards. But I was just recreating a wound over and over again, hoping this time I could end the story differently. Hearing my dad say those words didn't fix anything, but it gave me permission to stop running that program. It gave me permission to want something different, to break the pattern, and truly understand that I deserved it. One of my deep patterns was to overachieve, to outrun the pain. I used work as a drug. I used success as proof that I was okay. I started slowing down. I started resting. I started letting myself be a human instead of a machine. Hyper-independence. I was so used to doing everything alone that I didn't know how to ask for help. I really didn't know how to receive support. I very slowly started practicing letting people in, not always all the way, but enough to be supported. Emotional minimization. I had learned to make my feelings smaller so they didn't inconvenience anyone. I started letting myself live out loud and feel the full weight of what I was carrying. Over time, I trusted that my emotions were data. Having a caretaker identity, I deeply believed that my value was in what I could do for other people. I started learning that I mattered even when I wasn't useful, that I could rest and I deserved to take up space. I'm sure a lot of hyper-independent women can agree with this, but if I don't do it, no one will. I carried everything because I thought I had to, and I started testing that belief. I started letting some things fall, watching other people step up when I stepped back. Knowing patterns is one thing. Giving my nervous system new experiences what actually changed me. That is active healing, embodied work. I didn't just understand what was wrong. I practiced doing it differently until my body gave me a new way that was safe. One of the core messages in the Forged in the Fire series is that I healed inside of it, but I also continued to lead with love and an open heart. That doesn't mean I let people hurt me. It means I didn't let bitterness consume me. I didn't allow anger to become my identity. I didn't close off my heart just because somebody else couldn't hold it with care. I practiced forgiveness and letting go like it was a lifeline. Forgiveness for me was not about him. It was releasing the grip that resentment had on my nervous system. It was letting go of the story that I may or may not be a victim who had no power. It was about choosing to believe that what happened to me didn't have to define the rest of my life. I forgave my ex not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. And peace doesn't come from holding on to rage. It comes from letting it move through me and out. That does not mean I trust him. That does not mean I let him back in. And it doesn't mean I pretend what he did was okay. Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. It's not the same as forgetting. But it is releasing your own body from the prison of holding onto what somebody else did to you. The language of letting go was not a one-time event. It was a practice. Every time I felt the anger rise, I let it. I felt it fully, and then I let it go. Over and over and over again until I realized one day it wasn't inside me anymore. I could think about him and not hate him. I continued to lead with love because that's who I am. I refused to harden my heart just because the world can be hard. That is how I showed up for Hunter. It's why I didn't talk badly about his dad. It's why I protected the relationship with him and his dad, even when his dad wasn't doing that himself. It's how I showed up for my business. It's how I showed up for my family, letting my dad be perfectly imperfect. And I was grateful for the time that they spent with us during that season. I let my dad be imperfect and show up in his own way, even though sometimes that's not what I needed. I chose connection over resentment and presence over perfection. And it's definitely how I showed up for myself. That season of my life, I learned to love myself completely. I knew that all men are not dangerous. I chose to believe the kind of love that I experienced could also be the opposite. I stayed open, I stayed soft, and I stayed willing to try again, even though that scared me. By fall, winter 2024, I was well over a year separated. Hunter's dad was seeing him once a month by then, not consistent, but present enough that it wasn't just me. And I felt like I was ready to date again. I finally felt like myself, not a version of me that was managing chaos. The one that felt clear and whole and strong. So I wanted to test the waters. I still believed in love. I wanted a do-over. My sobriety was a new lease on life, and I wanted to do that again in a relationship. I wanted a real partner, someone who saw me and chose me and showed up consistently. I wanted something real. I had high standards, and I made no apology for them. I was not settling, I was not compromising, and I was not accepting anything less than what I deserved just because I was a single mom or because I had trauma. I felt excited, I felt nervous, alive in a way I didn't feel in a long time. I connected with a couple of men on a dating app. One of them is actually my boyfriend today, but we didn't start dating until 2025. He calls our time period back then the first time we talked. And I still remember our conversations back then because it felt different. We talked about everything: business, life, kids, the past. It felt comfortable in a way that was shocking. I could tell that he was a rare human. He was kind, he was funny, he was ambitious, also a business owner and a dad. And he shared openly. He was an excellent communicator. He was handsome. I could feel myself leaning in. I could feel the pull of possibility, but I continued to decline meeting in person. Not because I wasn't interested, I was, but I was afraid of repeating old patterns, that I might be wrong about his character, that I was seeing what I wanted to see instead of what was actually there. I recently found our old texts on my old phone, and you can clearly see where I pull back in the conversation, where I stop sharing on certain topics, where I create some distance, where I protect myself, and I was just willing. Again, not because I didn't want to, but I wasn't just dating for me. I also had Hunter in mind. So the protection was for both of us. He was very respectful. He didn't pressure me. He stayed consistent, and that mattered more than anything else. I went to Mexico for a retreat to see my dad and his wife. I needed some space. I just wanted to enjoy a part of my life. And during that trip, something shifted for me. I felt like I could finally see my life from the outside. It felt good, like I was moving in the right direction and it was all coming together. While I was in Mexico, Bear was with his dad. There was some messages that sent some red flags up, and I wasn't really sure what was coming. My nervous system started to be on high alert, and I couldn't process what I was hearing. When I came back home, there was legal paperwork I had to deal with. He made an allegation that was incorrect, and it had to do with my business and my income more than anything else. I knew this was his strategy. It was not about Hunter. It was not about assets. It was not about co-parenting. This was him punishing me for leaving, making me pay for being free. He wanted to take everything that I built and destroy it because he couldn't tolerate me having it while he had nothing. It got messy and scary real quick. I was suddenly in the middle of a system that was built to drain you emotionally and financially. He filed for things I am not going to share in public detail, but I will say this. It was about money and revenge, and I knew that was just the beginning. Now, if you're anything like me, you're not scared of these things because you're on the right side of the truth. But what I knew I needed to do was stop attempting to date. Not because I didn't want it anymore, but because I didn't want to invite anyone into this stuff. I didn't trust them to get it. I didn't trust them to stay. And I didn't trust that they wouldn't run the second they saw how ugly this was about to get. And more than that, I knew going through something like this is going to test every part of me, and I couldn't afford to lean on somebody new. I just didn't see it as fair. So I said what I could. I tried to be as honest as possible. And I told my now boyfriend that this was about to be a war zone and I couldn't just do this right now. He was kind about it. He didn't push. He didn't make me explain. He offered to be there. But it didn't change my decision. I knew what was coming next was going to take everything I had, and I couldn't afford to be distracted or vulnerable with someone new with what I was about to go through. I focused on what mattered: Hunter, my business, my home, and my freedom as I prepared for a war. It felt hard. I did have strong feelings for him, but I just knew that I wanted to be the best version of myself in the next relationship that I got into. Chess is what became my life. Every move mattered. I knew my ex would come for me. I just didn't know when or how. So I prepared, I documented, I saved every text, I tracked every interaction, I built the timeline, I kept the voice notes all recorded, and I did not engage emotionally. Nothing was built out of feelings. I was thoughtful, tactical, and deliberate. I thought the evidence would be the difference between my word against his. A documented pattern when demands started coming through. I did not react emotionally. So yes, I moved on, I healed, I grew, I did the next right thing for Hunter, but I also lived inside of a chess game that I did not choose. I prepared for impact while rebuilding my life. I held grief and hope at the exact same time. And I also learned that being free doesn't necessarily mean being safe. It just means you get to choose how to fight. Your life does become a chessboard when you leave someone who can't tolerate your freedom. Not because you're paranoid or because you're bitter. It's because you're awake. You understand that at the end of the relationship is not the end of the fight. It's the beginning of a different one. You play the long game because you have to, because you know one wrong move could cost you everything and you cannot afford to lose. I decided I was in power, that I was free. And I also decided I was never going to let him take that from me, no matter what happened next. Being in power does not mean you are not afraid. It doesn't mean you're not tired. It doesn't mean you're not lonely. It doesn't mean you're not willing to move forward at any cost. It does mean that you're choosing to protect what matters and you're choosing to play the game even when you hate playing it. I broke patterns that have been running in my family for generations. I gave my son something I never got. I built a business that gave me leverage. I dated again even though I was terrified. I pulled back when I needed to protect myself. I documented everything, and through all of it, I kept an open heart. I kept believing that I would heal inside of the fire while protecting myself from getting burned. I continued to show up for my son, for my friends, for my business, and for myself. And I kept looking forward even though I didn't know where I was going. This is the Narcissist Worst Nightmare podcast, and this is where you learn that freedom is not always the end of the story, but it is the beginning of one that you get to choose to write. In the next episode, I'm going to tell you what happens when court decides your life. Custody battles, losing my home, cars, paying child support and spousal support, fighting for the right to keep what I built, watching the system fail me over and over and over again while trying to protect my son. This is the part where the legal system becomes another battlefield and you have to learn to fight in a language you do not speak. This is Forged in the Fire. If this episode landed with you, it's because you know what it's like to be free and trapped at the same time. You know what it's like to rebuild while preparing for the next hit. You understand how to play chess with someone who's trying to destroy you. On February 24th, I'm hosting the Get the Fuck Out game plan. I'm going to show you how to build financial autonomy so you have options, so you can leave, stay gone, and protect what you built. The truth is, leaving is not a packed bag. It's the beginning, but you need the leverage in order to make it stick. The link is in the show notes. The call itself is free. I want to show you how to build buying power that cannot be taken from you. Because if you can build an income in hell, you can build freedom anywhere. And if you can build freedom, you can also learn to protect it. This is the Narcissist Worst Nightmare podcast, and this is where you stop being afraid of what comes next and you start learning how to prepare for it.